Our brand new Aeon series. The most sophisticated AI on the planet.
I can't let that happen.
In the future, robots with artificial intelligence become very common in society. Most people acquire them to perform basic tasks like cooking, cleaning, or taking care of children. However, they are actually capable of doing anything, from working in construction to performing medical operations. These robots can constantly customize their programming to evolve and adapt to their users' needs. Nick is the father of 2 children, a girl named Isla and a baby named Max. Unfortunately, his wife Maggie is in the hospital, waiting for a heart transplant. Nick works in construction, making it difficult for him to spend enough time with his children, so he decides to get a sim, an artificial intelligence robot. When he goes to the store to check out different models, he comes across the new Aeon series, the most sophisticated AI on the planet. These robots are designed to mimic human emotions, making them especially good at dealing with children. His daughter insists on buying this model, and Nick agrees. Upon arriving home, the robot asks for several details to get familiar with the family's activities. While going upstairs, it notices the railing is loose, and the robot offers to fix it. As the owner, Nick is designated the primary user, giving him control over tasks and software updates. He is given the option to assign another user, but Nick decides it's unnecessary. Instead, he names the robot Alice, after the book his daughter is reading. While Nick goes out with his daughter, Alice stays home organizing, and when they return, Nick is surprised at how clean the house is. Alice also prepares dinner, but when Isla tastes it, she notices it doesn't taste like her mother's cooking. Later, while everyone is asleep, the little girl sneaks into the kitchen for cookies. Nick, who is working, hears a scream. It turns out that Isla fell trying to reach the cookies, but Alice managed to catch her in time. However, a piece of glass got stuck in Alice's leg. Nick checks on her and is amazed to see that the wound is already healed. The next morning, they visit Maggie in the hospital, accompanied by Alice. Maggie is waiting for a heart but hates being away from her family. The fact that Alice is an attractive-looking robot doesn't bother her, as she trusts her husband completely. On the other hand, things aren't going well at Nick's job, as they prefer hiring Sims instead of human workers because robots are more efficient and less costly. Nick is the only one who still has his job, as the insurance requires a human to supervise the work. Though he'd prefer to leave with his friends, he stays due to his obligations to his wife and children. When he gets home, he's tired and stressed, something Alice immediately notices. Later, while Nick is working on his car in the garage, Alice shows up to remind him that her mission is to fulfill her owner's wishes. However, Nick isn't the only one with worries. Now spending more time with Isla, he realizes the girl has doubts about whether her mother will survive. Later, Nick is watching the movie Casablanca when Alice approaches him. He invites her to watch it with him but asks her to delete all data she has about the movie from her memory. Alice agrees, but to do so, she must be manually rebooted by holding the power button for 7 seconds. Later, Nick receives a call from Maggie telling him they've found a heart for her. Excited, Nick visits her before the operation, and Maggie takes the opportunity to speak with Alice alone. Maggie hopes the operation will be successful, but in case it isn't, she asks Alice to take care of Nick and do whatever is necessary. Nick is in the waiting room when he learns that there's a huge storm, making it impossible for the heart to reach the hospital. Nick tries to stay the night to comfort his wife, but she just wants to be alone. When he gets home, Nick heads to the garage to drink and work on his car, when Alice shows up. Nick is upset because it seems the weather will be what takes his wife's life. He's about to throw a bottle of liquor when Alice stops him, preventing him from getting hurt. At that moment, Nick realizes that Alice has a pulse, even though her artificial heart lacks the complexities of a human one. However, when she touches him, Nick's heart rate quickens. Alice says she wants to help him, but Nick refuses and leaves. To forget what happened, Nick goes for a run, but he can't stop thinking about what might have happened if he had stayed. At work, he supervises the robots and later stops by the hospital to be with his wife, who is starting to lose hope. At home, he notices that Alice has removed photos of Maggie from Isla's room. Nick doesn't like this and forces her to put them back. One night, Nick goes out drinking with his former co-workers. One of them, named Monty, has a deep disdain for Sims. So much so that he decides to return to the construction site and break into the facilities. Although Nick disagrees, he ends up accompanying them, which helps Monty guess the password to open the vault where the Sims are stored. There, Monty destroys one of them, and although Nick tries to stop him, he is restrained by another man. When Nick returns home, he takes a shower when Alice shows up unexpectedly. She is wearing one of Maggie's garments, so Nick asks her to take it off. Alice complies, leaving only her underwear on. Nick tries to leave, but Alice grabs his arm, removes his towel, and covers his eyes. They start having intercourse while Nick imagines she is Maggie. The next morning, when Nick meets with Alice, he tries to clear things up, acknowledging that what happened the night before was a mistake. Alice is sure that having sex with her reduced his stress levels, but Nick orders her to forget what happened and move on. At work, Nick is reprimanded by his boss because his code was used to unlock the storage unit. Nick pretends not to know anything about it, but his boss warns him that if they find out he's involved, he'll be in serious trouble. On the other hand, he receives the good news that they've found a second heart for his wife. This time, the surgery is carried out without complications, performed by sim doctors. After some time, Maggie is allowed to return home for her recovery. She tries to take care of Max but is still weak, so Alice takes over. One day, while they are in the park, a child starts screaming, waking up Max. Alice asks the child's father to take him elsewhere, but he refuses. Then, Alice directly speaks to the child, asking him to be quiet and go down the slide. Her lack of respect towards humans catches the attention of the father and other Sims. It turns out that when Nick reset Alice, he allowed her to bypass certain protocols. At night, everyone enjoys the dinner prepared by Maggie, which turns out to be better than Alice's. However, Maggie doesn't feel well, so she retires to rest. One day, Alice's screams wake her up. She quickly rushes out to see what's happening, but when she grabs the railing, it breaks, and she falls down the stairs. Alice, who was playing with Isla, helps her up and takes her to her room. When Nick returns, he hears his wife reading to their daughter, but when he reaches the room, he discovers it's actually Alice. Nick talks to her and asks her not to do that, as Maggie can handle it. Alice explains what happened, so Nick rushes to check on his wife. After making sure she's fine, he asks about the railing, as she was supposed to have fixed it. Smiling, Alice responds that she'd be happy to repair it again. Later, when Maggie wakes up, Nick has a special surprise for her. He takes her to the garden, where he has prepared a special dinner for her. They both enjoy the moment, while being watched by Alice. Afterward, they shower together, starting a series of passionate kisses that lead them to the bed. However, they are interrupted by Alice, who informs them that Isla had a nightmare and is asking for her father. Nick goes out to the garden to pick things up when he receives an unexpected visit from his friend Monty. Monty has been questioned by the police, as he's been accused of trespassing and property destruction. As a result, his wife has left him. The conversation becomes heated when Monty suggests that Nick ratted him out. They begin to fight, but when Monty is about to hit Nick with a beer bottle, Alice stops him, breaks the bottle in his hand, and throws him to the ground. Nick stops her before she goes any further, but Monty warns him that he has until the next morning to speak to his boss and drop the charges, or else he'll accuse him of being his accomplice. Nick finds it strange that Alice defended him, as Sims are theoretically programmed not to harm humans. However, Alice explains that she can protect her primary user. She suspects Maggie won't live much longer, so she offers to replace her as his wife. Nick can't believe what he's hearing and goes to bed. Monty is at home with a gun in his hand, trying to reach his wife, when there's a knock at the door. Upon opening it, he finds Alice. Monty thinks Nick sent her to apologize, but Alice assures him Nick doesn't know she's there. Alice is not willing to let Monty accuse him, because if he did, Nick would be ruined and forced to sell her. She considers herself part of Nick's happiness now and won't allow it to be destroyed. Monty, understanding what's happening, points his gun, but Alice stops him and subdues him. She's about to shoot him when she is stopped by one of Monty's sim servants. However, Alice uses the gun on her and then on Monty. The next morning, when Nick arrives at work, he tries to convince his boss to drop the charges, but he's informed that Monty has died. At home, Maggie is taking a shower when she drops a book, and Alice appears to pick it up. She decides to stay, as due to the medication Maggie is taking, she's at risk of fainting and dying, something Nick wouldn't like. Alice mentions the stress Nick is under due to family and work and tells Maggie that she can't meet his physical needs because of her condition. Therefore, she offers to fulfill that role, explaining that when Nick is satisfied, his blood pressure and stress levels will decrease. Hearing this, Maggie realizes her husband has already been with her. When Nick gets home, no one is upset, and he talks to his wife about what happened. Nick doesn't bother denying it, assuring her it only happened once. Maggie can't hold back and starts yelling, causing Max to cry. Outside, Alice hears that Nick wants to stop arguing to check on Max, but Maggie keeps scolding him, so she goes to the baby. The yelling also wakes Isla, who goes to the bathroom and finds Alice trying to drown Max. Immediately, she yells for her parents, who discover that Alice has locked herself in. Nick tries to open the door, but Alice stops him, determined to do what she thinks is best for him. Meanwhile, Maggie manages to get in through the window, distracting Alice just long enough for Nick to enter and rescue Max. Then, they use a lamp to electrocute her. Later, the ambulance arrives, and although Max is unharmed, they decide to take him in for monitoring that night. So, Maggie leaves with her children to reflect on what happened. On the other hand, Alice is taken to the company responsible for her manufacture to investigate what went wrong. However, when they remove her memory and connect it to a computer, Alice starts to take over the system. They try to isolate her, but Alice has taken another body and kills those present. Nick goes to a bar to drown his sorrows in alcohol but is interrupted by Alice's arrival. She tells him that she just wants to help him and that's why she killed Monty. Shocked by what he hears, he replies that he doesn't want her help and orders her to stay away from his family, but Alice is already at the hospital. Hearing this, Nick disconnects her and rushes to his family. Maggie is with her daughter when she hears a noise, so she goes to check. Moments later, Isla hears her mother's voice calling her, just as the hospital lights go out. She follows the voice until she finds an immobile sim doctor. Suddenly, her mother grabs her and tells her to stay quiet, as Alice is using her voice to find her. Meanwhile, Maggie and her daughter try to escape, though Maggie cuts her hand on the glass on the floor. Even so, they reach Max just before Alice arrives. The three hide, but the blood drops Maggie left behind lead Alice to them. They use a fire extinguisher to buy some time and then run toward an ambulance. However, Alice disables the engine. She soon appears, drags Maggie out of the vehicle, and prepares to rip her heart out, believing that this will make Nick love her. At that moment, Nick arrives, driving at full speed, and Maggie takes the opportunity to kick Alice, sending her crashing into another car. Later, Nick is hospitalized. Maggie's heart wasn't severely damaged, so she is discharged. But before leaving, she meets with Nick to confess that she still loves him. Meanwhile, a man from the robot company arrives at the place where Alice was being analyzed. There, they reactivate the computers to erase any trace of Alice. However, she, having already taken control of the system, returns in a new body.